the so-called Epstein victims who have received over $100 million.
So-called Epstein victims. We should call that out for what that is. That's a bullshit.
No, it's not. They are saying that they are Epstein victims and they have been paid. They can come out and say, no one is stopping them. I would welcome them. I would encourage them. Come out and tell us.
Well, actually, quite a few. Hang on. Quite a few.
You want people prosecuted. Who should be prosecuted and what should they be charged with?
Yeah, I want the 6 co-conspirators to be prosecuted for trafficking little kids.
Okay,
and I want the rest of these people. Hold on, Clay. I'm answering your question.
I'm a lawyer, so this matters to me. When you say people should be charged, and when you
human
say
trafficking is a crime, you might want to check your penal code.
The truth is, the Biden administration didn't release these files. The Trump administration promised to and hasn't released all the files. So the American people and the watching world, because it affects many other countries too, are looking on going, who is actually going to honor the claim to be transparent? And I think until there is proper transparency on this, this is going to go on and on and on and on.
Hey everyone, I just finished watching a debate about the Epstein files that completely spiraled, and it was intense from start to finish. One of Trump's defenders went on live television and essentially brushed aside trafficking survivors, even referring to them as so-called Epstein victims. You can probably guess how that landed. The backlash was immediate and fierce. At the center of the argument was a bigger question. Why does it seem like the UK is seeing real consequences for powerful people tied to Epstein, while in the United States, accountability still feels stalled? In the UK, major figures have seen their reputations collapse. Here, millions of documents remain sealed, and instead of answers, we get deflection after deflection. I have a lot to say about this, but you need to watch the full exchange first. The tension builds quickly, especially when the debate shifts to who should face prosecution, and the defender starts struggling to justify positions that become harder and harder to defend. It's one of those moments where the argument unravels in real time. Drop a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from. I'm genuinely curious whether viewers outside the US are as stunned by this as I am. And stick around to the end because I'm breaking down why calling trafficking survivors so-called victims might be one of the most troubling political evasions we've seen this year. If you believe transparency on the Epstein files shouldn't be optional, hit like, and let's dive in.
Just first of all, Clay Travis, let's just talk about this Epstein scandal, because it is completely bizarre sitting here in London watching people go down like dominoes. And these are not insignificant figures. You've got the former Prince Andrew in line to the throne of the UK. Obviously, you've got Lord Mandelson, who was the UK ambassador to the United States. He's gone. They've both been completely torched as a consequence of what's emerged about them in these files. But we're not seeing that in America. Why are we not? And do you want us to?
Well, I think, first of all, there should be people bearing consequences who were involved in actually some sort of activity with girls alongside of Epstein. And I think you have seen a lot of Americans lose their jobs. I mean, the head of one of the biggest law firms in the United States lost his job. You've seen people in media lose jobs recently that they've gotten. But I think also people are looking at some of the details and saying there's a difference. For instance, Howard Lutnick's being attacked right now, and you can criticize him for continuing to interact with Jeffrey Epstein, certainly. But he went to Epstein Island with his wife and a bunch of kids on a cruise trip to the Caribbean. And so all connections are not the exact same. And so I think what you're actually seeing in the United States is there's being a lot of discernment as to what was going on. I'll also add in, there's so much volume here that I do think a lot of people are just frankly overwhelmed with the 3 million different documents that are out there and all the different names that are flooding the zone. I think there's some degree of people just being overwhelmed with the sheer amount of people that were involved here across all the landscape. And so, again, I think there's some discernment when it comes to actual interaction. Are these business partners? Are these people who were involved with women or not? Are these people that may have even gone to the island, as I said, in the case of Howard Lutnick, and done so with their wife and with their kids, which I think is quite a lot different than the crimes that Epstein was accused of committing.
Okay, Mike Nellis, I mean, notwithstanding, a lot of what Clay said there, I'm sure is right. But people want accountability. And as I said to Congresswoman Mace, the fact that there are going to be more than 3 million documents from the Epstein files that apparently are not going to be made public strikes me as absolutely staggering. And of course, that's going to do nothing but inflame all the raging conspiracy theories.
I think that's absolutely right, is people should be incredibly angry that nobody is being prosecuted for this. And let's be clear about what's happening here. The Department of Justice under Donald Trump and Pam Bondi are covering this up. Let's not forget that in July, over the July 4th weekend, they told us that this investigation was over and that there was nothing there. How many times do we have to hear that Donald Trump isn't in the Epstein files, then we find out he's in there a million times? How many times do we have to listen to guys like Howard Lutnick say, I met Jeffrey Epstein once, and then it turns out he was a creep, and I wasn't there? You keep unwinding this stuff, and you find that these guys have been lying for so long. So the reason there isn't accountability, either criminally or just in polite society, like Nancy Mace talked about earlier, is because Donald Trump is at the heart of this, because these guys are covering it up. Howard Lutnick says, I didn't know anything about Jeffrey Epstein. He only lived next door to the guy, started a business with the guy, and brought his kids, which to me is disgusting, on a trip to Epstein Island after it was already known that the guy was a registered sex offender. Donald Trump is out there saying, I didn't know anything about Jeffrey Epstein and what he was doing, except he was talking about it. He partied with the guy. He met his wife, his current wife, at an Epstein party. Not to mention the fact that he's mentioned the files over 1 million times. So it's embarrassing to me. And to your point, Piers, all over Europe, people are having their careers destroyed because of their relationship with a guy who is a registered sex offender who trafficked kids. And that's not happening in the United States. And it's embarrassing. And frankly, it's embarrassing when MAGA bootlickers come on and defend this stuff, because it's an 80-20 issue to the vast majority of Americans who are pissed. Kids were abused here. We got to take this seriously.
We have, but Isaiah Martin, I mean, you know.
Well, the government hasn't. You're taking it seriously, Piers, which I appreciate.
What crimes specifically should be charged?
Well, at a bare minimum, we know that there were kids that were trafficked. How is it possible that Ghislaine Maxwell is the only person that's ever going to be prosecuted for that?
Well, because she trafficked. I mean, if you read the indictment,
she trafficked them by herself. Is your position? Wait, hold on, Clay. Is your position that Ghislaine Maxwell trafficked these kids by herself?
She trafficked them for Jeffrey Epstein. That is what the charges
but by
show.
herself,
That's
nobody else helped. There were 1,000 little boys and 1,000 little girls that were trafficked on behalf of Jeffrey Epstein by Ghislaine Maxwell. But is she the only one who did it?
That is not accurate based on the evidence. I just asked a simple question. You want people prosecuted. Who should be prosecuted and what should they be charged with?
Yeah, I want the 6 co-conspirators to be prosecuted for trafficking little kids.
Okay,
and I want the rest of these people. Hold on, Clay. I'm answering your question.
I'm a lawyer, so this matters to me. When you say people should be charged, and when you say
trafficking is a crime, you might want to check your penal code.
Charged, who and with what crimes? Let me also ask you this, as we lead into that: why did Joe Biden not charge anybody? Why did Barack Obama not charge anybody? Do you think the only thing that Democrats and Republicans agree on is that Jeffrey Epstein should be protected and everybody else around him should be protected? Look. The reality here, in my opinion, is if you actually look at the evidence that came out, Trump in 2006 said, thank the Lord, basically, I'm paraphrasing, in the actual Epstein files in 2006, that you were able to charge this guy. We all knew that things were going on that were inappropriate. You can't go after Donald Trump on this at all. Do you really think that Joe Biden
hold on. Let's talk about that for a second.
Evidence that Trump committed crimes when he tried to imprison him for the rest of his life over bogus charges in New York City, when he tried to put him in prison, bankrupt him? You think he's set on Epstein?
Right.
This just doesn't add up. So again, I circle back to the basic question. Who should be charged and what should they be charged with based on your reading of the evidence? Specifically, tell me.
So this is a clever trick that these MAGA influencers like to do, is that they want to blame this on Joe Biden.
How is it a clever trick?
Hey, Clay, let me finish my point. Hold on, and then you can tell me why I'm wrong. But let me finish my point.
I said
I answered your question already, Clay, but you keep interrupting me. All right, listen.
So
this is what they want to do.
Tell us what the charges should be.
This entire thing is a failure of multiple administrations. There are Democrats and Republicans in the file. And the bottom line here is that there's an Epstein class and its defenders like Clay, and there's everybody else. And so right now, they're defending Donald Trump, who has been covering this up. There are 6 co-conspirators.
Clay, there are 6. Everybody should be charged with crimes.
No, that's not what I said, Clay. There are 6.
You can't even give me a name or a crime.
Do you realize how obtuse you sound at the idea that nobody else can be charged by this? There are 6 co-conspirators in the files that Congress has seen that are currently blocked off. You can't tell me that 1,000 little girls and boys were trafficked and nobody else.
And what the crimes
I don't know their
should
names
be.
because they're concealing them in the files, Clay, because the Trump administration is covering this
Do you know
up.
what? You know,
So you're telling me to tell you something
guys,
I don't know. 'cause they're
time
covering
out. All
right.
Time out. You know, the bottom line, Clay, is this. The best way to work out who should be prosecuted and who should be charged is for every one of these files to be released unredacted. With the exception of the names of the victims. Hang on, with the exception of the names of the victims, right? So that everyone knows exactly who's been accused of what, and then everyone can determine who should potentially be prosecuted or not. Because they're going to keep back 3 million files, the suspicion will continue that this is a powerful
Here's what I would
cover-up.
say. Here's what I would say about all of the women who receive payments. And I believe they received about $120 million in payments from the Epstein estate after he died. All of them are free to go out and name exactly who they say assaulted them, who they say victimized them in any way. They have complete ability to do that. The so-called Epstein victims who have received over $100 million.
So-called Epstein victims. We should call that out for what that is. That's a bullshit
No,
crime.
it's not. They are
So-called
saying
Epstein
that they
victims.
are Epstein victims and they have been paid. They can come out and say, no one is stopping them. I would welcome them. I would encourage them. Come out
This is
and tell
embarrassing
us.
Well, actually,
for you,
quite a
Clay.
few.
You should quit while you're-
Hang on. Quite a few.
and help
Okay,
to
but
bring
Clay, quite a
criminal
few.
charges there.
Quite a
That
few
seems
are
like
beginning to
an
do that.
easy solution.
Quite a few are beginning to do that.
This
So
is
it's
the
going to be
Republican
interesting how
Party.
many more follow that path. Isaiah, you've been waiting very patiently. What's your view of where we are with this scandal?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think that this is a entire view of the Republican Party right here with Clay, the so-called Epstein victims. Look, ultimately, I think if the Republicans wanted to end this situation, they would call and join the millions of Americans that are saying that we want to see the unredacted Epstein files. 3 million files currently sit as we stand today that are redacted. People want to see the truth. And the fact that you have MAGA running around carrying water for Trump, as Mike said, claiming that these victims are so-called victims or whatever it is, it's a shame to the American public. And it's why the Republican Party is losing trust all around this country. I think it's abundantly clear. It's why they're losing special elections everywhere we see, because of the fact that they are losing the trust of the American people. And I think that what Clay just said makes that abundantly clear.
I don't think that
Okay.
Republicans actually have any particular opinion. I'm sharing my opinion. I think actually the
You just said
majority
they
of
were
people
so-called
are just
Epstein
all
victims.
fed
You
up
said
with
so-called.
the Epstein situation in general. My position is, if you
They're
actually
fed
look
up?
at the evidence, I do not believe
Clay, wait a
that
second.
every
You said that
Democrat
they're
in
fed
power
up?
and every Republican in power conspired to cover up a bevy of charges that would otherwise have been brought. And by the way, if you
No,
want to
Clay,
make it a
Clay,
Democrat
what people are fed
Republican
up
issue,
with, they're fed up with the fact
overwhelming-
that people are going in this country
overwhelmingly
and they're
the
carrying
people who
water
are
for
accused
pedophiles in
of
America.
having
That's what they're fed up with,
are
Clay.
actually Democrat donors like Jeffrey Epstein. If you want to make it a Democrat-Republican issue, there are way
Clay,
more.
this is
prominent
what's so
Democrats
insane
involved
about
in the
this
Epstein
situation.
files
We
than
have
there
said
are
from the very
prominent
beginning
Republicans.
that we
But
support
based on all
every
the
single
evidence
person
that I
that is
have
inside of the
seen,
Epstein files
I don't
that has
buy
been
that
assaulting
Joe Biden-
children.
You know the truth.
We want
the
to
truth
call
is,
them out.
okay,
We want to see them
Isaiah,
prosecuted.
okay,
That's
guys,
what
guys,
we
guys.
say.
The truth is, the truth is,
that they're not going to charge
guys, the
anybody.
truth is, the Biden administration didn't release these files. The Trump administration promised to and hasn't released all the files. So the American people and the watching world, because this affects many other countries too, are looking on going, who is actually going to honor the claim to be transparent? And I think until there is proper transparency on this, this is going to go on and on and on and on. And actually, someone at some stage has to go, you know what? We're going to put it all out there, because until that happens, the conspiracy theories will rage.
I'll be honest, watching that debate about the Epstein files wasn't just frustrating. It was genuinely enraging. And Clay Travis referring to them as so-called Epstein victims might be one of the most morally hollow statements I've heard in political discourse this year. Think about what that phrase implies. We're not talking about vague allegations floating around social media. We're talking about young girls who were trafficked and abused by a man who was not only accused but convicted. We're talking about survivors whose claims were validated through settlements totaling well over $100 million. That money wasn't handed out as a charity gesture. It was paid because harm was acknowledged, because wrongdoing was real. You don't distribute nine-figure settlements if nothing happened. To casually attach so-called to victims in that context isn't skepticism. It's erasure. It's rhetorical sanitizing of documented abuse. And the mental contortions required to defend that framing are staggering. What struck me most was how Travis kept demanding precise names, formal indictments, specific criminal counts, while completely sidestepping the central point Mike Nellis was making. How are the public, journalists, or commentators supposed to provide that level of specificity when millions of documents remain sealed or heavily redacted? The Trump administration is sitting on roughly 3 million pages of material, much of it shielded from scrutiny. That's not a minor detail, and that's the entire issue. It's the oldest courtroom tactic in the book. Demand granular evidence while actively benefiting from its concealment. It's like someone hiding a smoking gun in a locked drawer and then smugly asking, "Well, where's your proof?" The audacity is breathtaking. Transparency can't be conditional on public clairvoyance. If the files are hidden, you can't simultaneously mock critics for not quoting from them. Then there's the Howard Lutnick defense. Travis floated the idea that it somehow mitigates concern that Lutnick visited Epstein's island because he brought his wife and children, after Epstein was already a registered sex offender. That logic doesn't neutralize suspicion. If anything, it intensifies concern. Who knowingly brings their family to the private property of a man publicly identified as a sexual predator? That's not a clean bill of character. That's a decision that raises even more questions about judgment and awareness. The debate quickly devolved into whataboutism. Why didn't Obama prosecute anyone? Why didn't Biden? If those administrations failed to act decisively, that deserves scrutiny too. Accountability should not be partisan, but here's the distinction. Donald Trump explicitly promised full transparency on the Epstein files. He said he would expose what others wouldn't. Instead, the documents remained locked away. Trump's own documented social history with Epstein, the years of association, the parties, the introduction of his current wife at one of those gatherings, makes the silence even more conspicuous. Yet we're told he's the figure uniquely positioned to clean it all up. The larger tragedy is that this should be the least controversial issue in American politics. Children were trafficked. Powerful men were implicated. Justice should follow. It should not matter whether those names belong to Republicans, Democrats, financiers, media executives, or celebrities. The idea that demanding transparency is somehow a partisan attack reveals how warped the conversation has become. Instead of unified outrage over exploitation, we get partisan shielding. Piers Morgan was correct in one fundamental respect. Release the documents, redact the names of victims for privacy and protection, and let the evidence speak for itself. If powerful individuals are innocent, transparency clears them. If they're guilty, justice demands exposure. The only group that benefits from continued secrecy is the group with something to lose. And then there's Ghislaine Maxwell. She is serving time for trafficking minors. But the idea that a sprawling operation involving wealth, influence, private jets, and international travel somehow had only one prosecutable participant strains credibility. Networks don't function in isolation. Systems like that don't operate without clients. The notion that accountability conveniently stopped at one person feels incomplete at best and deliberately protective at worst. At the end of the day, labeling trafficking survivors as so-called victims isn't just politically reckless, it's ethically corrosive. It shifts suspicion onto those who were harmed rather than those who wielded power. It reframes documented trauma as questionable narrative. And when that language is paired with resistance to document release, the optics become even darker. If someone truly believes in justice, transparency shouldn't be threatening. Blocking access while dismissing survivors is not principled skepticism. It's defensive positioning. And anyone willing to trivialize victims in order to shield powerful figures deserves intense scrutiny, not deference.